Like I promised, I said I would read the budget, and I have done so. We find that the priorities of this government are not the priorities of ordinary Canadians. This is a government that proposes to spend 1,000 times more on prisons than on youth crime prevention, 1,000 times more on jets than on helping kids get a college and university education. It's spending more on one day of a G8-G20 summit than it's spending on helping seniors out of poverty in a whole year. There's nothing on affordable housing. There's nothing on child care. This is a government that doesn't seem to be listening to what Canadian families are telling us. And there's no credible deficit reduction plan because there's a black hole in the middle of this budget. They don't tell you what the prisons are going to cost. They don't tell you what the tax cuts are going to cost. They don't tell you what the jets are going to cost. And those are the biggest expenditure items in the middle of the budget. So we don't believe the budget is credible. We're forced to reject the budget. And we're also forced to reject a government that shows so little respect for parliamentary democracy and our democratic.
Will you move a motion of non-confidence on Friday? Will you move a motion of non-confidence on Friday?
We take the issue of contempt of Parliament and disrespect for our institutions very, very seriously. What I want to do today is focus on the budget judgment.
Is the budget week Quebec's needs here?
Absolutely not. I mean, we don't see how it is not possible to give those $2.2 billion to Quebec, since Quebec was the very first province to having harmonized the sales tax with the GST. They gave last year $4.2 billion to Ontario and $1.6 to BC, and nothing for Quebec. So just unacceptable. I said that was a sine qua non condition. It is not met, so we can't support that budget.
After years of the well-connected and the big businesses getting all of the breaks, I believe that it's time that families got a break. I want to build a Canada where no senior lives in poverty, a Canada where no family has to go without a doctor, a Canada where every Canadian can retire with dignity. Clearly, Mr. Harper doesn't. Mr. Harper had an opportunity to address the needs of hardworking, middle-class Canadians and families, and he missed that opportunity. This government could have achieved practical, affordable results that would have helped families right now to show Canadians that Ottawa actually can work for them. But Stephen Harper chose not to do this. I called on him to create new doctors and nurses for the 5 million Canadians without access to family medicine. Mr. Harper's budget will not do this. I called on him to help Canadians with ever-rising energy bills, to remove the federal sales tax from home heating. Mr. Harper's budget will not do that. Because 250,000 seniors live in poverty today, a national disgrace, I called on him to ensure that in this rich country, no senior lives in poverty. Mr. Harper's budget will not do that. Because every Canadian deserves to have access to a financially secure retirement, I called on him to set goals to increase benefits to the Canada Pension Plan. Mr. Harper's budget will not do that. Nothing in this budget has persuaded me that Mr. Harper has changed his ways and is prepared to work with others in Parliament to give middle-class families a break. Il n'y a rien dans ce budget qui m'a convaincu, and therefore New Democrats will not support the budget as presented.
Will you therefore vote non-confidence on Friday? Will you therefore vote non-confidence on Friday?
Well, I don't know what's happening on Friday. We haven't seen any motions, but we will not be supporting the budget that's been presented.
We've just received a budget that nobody is going to support. We're about to go into an election campaign from the sounds of it. How is this going to play out for public servants, public service, and Canadians? How is this election campaign going to play out?
Well, I think there's a number of stark contrasts that will be presented to Canadians. This budget is an inherently cynical document. It continues the trend in the big picture from CUPE's point of view of shifting tax burden to average working Canadians and away from corporations. How a budget that purports to want to pay down the deficit can be silent about cutting revenues to the tune of $6 billion in corporate tax cuts is beyond me. So if in fact we are heading into an election, and I suspect we are, I think it's incumbent upon public employees to talk about issues like retirement insecurity in Canada. The poorest of the poor had a few bones threw at them today, but there needs to be a 15% increase in the GIS in Canada. How a budget in 2011 doesn't speak about medical health care transfers, a significant part of provincial budgets, a deal that's expiring in 2013. We're not charting a course for that. And I look at polling the release today, the number 1 and number 2 issues for Canadians by large numbers this morning were Medicare, the state of Medicare, and jobs in the economy. And ask yourself this question: what does Budget 2011 do about sustaining Medicare or putting people back to work? We have 1.5 million Canadians out of work, and I suspect if this budget ever sees the light of day, 2012 and 2013 planned cuts in department spending for federal employees will only add to those unemployment rolls.